On this episode of Bite Sized, we are watching and discussing the 37th scene of the movie Twilight. For those of you watching along at home, that's from 48:39 to 49:35, another short one. And now, on to the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back, or welcome the first time, to Bite Sized. If this is your first episode, here's what's going on. My name's Ben. I'm your host. You probably figured out that part already. I'm watching the movie Twilight one scene at a time with a different guest every week. I take someone, send them a clip of Twilight, anywhere from 30 seconds to 3 minutes, and then we talk about it for about a half hour. And whoo boy, is that going to be difficult today. Speaking of guests, my guest today is an actor, improviser, and podcaster from Kansas City, but currently based in London. He is one half of the Audio Obscura podcast, David Martinez. Welcome to Bite Sized.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to start this interview the way I start every interview on the show. That is by asking you, David, what is your history with the Twilight franchise?
I think I read a book in high school because everyone was talking about it. So I think they came out when I was in high school. I read a book.
First book came out in 2005, I think.
Yep. Okay, that tracks. So I was like sophomore in high school probably.
Got
I read, I don't even remember if I finished it or not, to be fair. And then I definitely saw a movie that I have no recollection of. It might very well have been on a plane.
Interesting. Do you remember which one?
Probably the first one. I don't think
that would make sense.
I'm not one to start in the middle of a series.
Was this the kind of plane where you had a menu of options to choose from, or was it just the movie of this flight is Twilight?
Oh, that's a good question. I would assume a menu of options to choose from, but when did the first movie come out?
2008.
That feels okay. So
that's sort of a threshold where technology was sort of just then getting to the point where you could choose from a selection in front of you, as opposed to just having no choice but to watch the movie that is being shown to you.
It's really testing my memory. You know what? Something's coming back to me now that at one point I pirated a Twilight film.
Really?
So either I saw the second one and pirated that one, or that's the one that I'm remembering that was my experience with Twilight.
Okay.
I remember laying on a bed somewhere, like in my apartment or somewhere.
I would assume that was not in a plane then if you were laying on a bed.
No, certainly not. Nor would I pirate. I don't think I'd be capable of figuring out how to pirate a film on a plane.
That would be difficult.
But I have no memory whatsoever of really any of these films. I remember bits and pieces of the story.
Okay, that's good. What was your draw? What got you? What made you decide I'm going to give this a shot, both the book and the movie? Was it just people you knew talking about it? Was it for a romantic partner? Are you just super into vampires? What was the appeal to you there?
Oh, probably 2 out of 3. I remember having a romantic partner, girlfriend at the time. I'm so curious. How many of your guests have that as an answer?
Oh, David, don't get ahead of me. I want to hear how this goes, because this may play into a theory that I have going on, but keep going.
It's amazing. I remember doing it for that. I remember everyone was talking about it anyway.
Yeah.
I remember, in a small level, enjoying it. I mean, recognizing that this was not well written, but captivatingly written. Like it was just like, so many TV shows now that just makes you want to keep watching, even though you have to objectively say this is not cinematically a good piece of screen content.
And definitely intended for a very specific audience. And if you are not inside of that audience, it's going to have nothing for you.
Yeah.
I will ask, this romantic partner for whom you tried to get into Twilight, did the relationship work out?
No, Oh, well, I mean, I think it worked out for a while after that. No, I don't remember. I don't remember the timeline of all this. We dated for probably the better part of a year.
Okay.
And I don't remember where in that the Twilight stuff fell.
Well, for those of my listeners keeping score at home, David, this makes you maybe the 5th or 6th guest I've had on the show who specifically got into Twilight for a romantic partner, and it has worked out 0 times. All of those relationships are gone now.
Oh, God.
So the message continues to be, don't do it. It doesn't work. Look, if you're going to get into Twilight, good. Do it for you. Don't do it for someone else, though.
Well, how many guests are you procuring from Twilight conventions? Are you going to those at all? And
no, I mean,
because I feel like you have to play the field. You have to choose your right audience.
Really, I think this is more a case of most of the people I'm interviewing are around our age who would have been in high school when Twilight came out. And how many people do you know that are still with their high school sweethearts?
That's true. My best friend is with his high school sweetheart, and that is it.
Yeah, I could, not that many that I know of are still together. I'm certainly not. Yeah, it didn't work for you with Twilight. It didn't work for me with Doctor Who. There are just some things we try to get into for other people and we give up on later.
Yeah. So true.
So you read the book, you see a couple movies on a plane or pirated, and then I guess at some point you make the decision to give up and never come back, huh?
Yeah, that was pretty much it. I mean, I remember hearing more about it in the zeitgeist, plot elements and story elements, and so I think I probably got most of all the major spoilers that came.
Okay.
In terms of like what happens in the series in the end.
Got it. Okay. The highlights, the cliff notes.
Yeah.
The boring parts, if I'm being completely honest. Twilight, with Twilight, the devil is in the details. The really interesting stuff is in the small choices that you wonder why anyone would make.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Whose imagination, whose dream world is this?
Right.
Whose dream fever is this?
/ what weird dream committee worked up all of this?
Yeah.
And I guess no one in your current present day life has made an attempt to get you to watch Twilight or anything like that?
No, honestly, it hasn't even been mentioned. I think we covered it on an episode of our podcast once a long time ago.
Oh, really? What podcast would that be?
Audio Obscura.
Oh, really? Tell me more about that.
It's a great podcast. I do it with my co-host, Michael Foster. We basically take turns picking weird things from the internet and presenting them to the other, and they have to figure out what it is. We just take little clips of it, and they have to figure out like what is the content, what is the subject matter of what they're listening to. And I think one of us, I'm pretty sure Foster played for me the like director's commentary. Well, no, I think like Robert Pattinson, and maybe Kristen Stewart and the director were all in a room together and doing the commentary. And it was basically playing the DVD commentary as the mystery.
Do you remember what scene they were talking about, or anything about the conversation they were having?
There was a van involved, crashing, pushing a van.
Yep, I know exactly what you're talking, or at least the exact scene you're talking about.
Most of the focus in the episode was on the hardcore thirst that the director had for Robert Pattinson. That was very clear in her conversation.
Hey everybody, editor Ben Oxher here, also sometimes editor and contributor to Audio Obscura. This is from the one they were talking about, just in case you're curious. It's episode 77, Inexplicable Attraction.
This is a cool place we shot at, like a community college.
See, that's when I had PECs.
Yeah, baby.
I had PECs about 2 days.
Yeah, you're looking good here.
You could hear her salivating in that clip. You could hear this woman drooling.
Could one of the female voices be Kristen Stewart? Is that the right name? That's the right name.
Ooh, if it is, I feel horrible because I'm also a fan of hers. But the third lady, I don't like her.
Great. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the episode we're talking about today. It is less than a minute, and hoo boy, David, sometimes in the course of this podcast, I have learned movies are not supposed to be watched in the way that I'm watching them, because sometimes you get a scene.
You mean enjoyment?
Sure, or anything to see at all. Because sometimes you get a scene, and by scene I mean about 55 seconds of movie that solely exists to set up the next scene. I'll give my listener a brief overview of what's going on. Bella and Edward are standing outside the school. There's a bunch of students walking around them. They see each other and they sort of walk in slow motion into the woods. And that's it. There is no dialogue in this scene. It's all music. With that out of the way, let's get into the episode itself. They're just sort of standing around and people are walking in a bunch of different directions around them.
Yeah.
My first question is, where in the school day is this? Is it before class?
Yes.
Is it after? Is it lunchtime?
There's a shot of Bella that I noticed where I felt some level of satisfaction in that exact question because everyone was walking in one direction, which looked like it was away from the school.
Yeah.
But yes, arguably before that, there are people walking in multiple directions, and it is very confusing whether people are going into the school, which I have qualms about. Is that the school? Because it looks like a hospice.
That is a school that is a real school in somewhere in Oregon, not Portland, but somewhere in Oregon, playing Forks High School, which does not look like that, I don't think.
Okay.
But yes, that is a real high school, and scenes have taken place in that sort of general area before, so I feel pretty confident in saying their school. But you are right that, like, throughout the course of the scene, people walk, towards the left of Bella and also to the right of Bella. And if everyone was walking in one direction, it'd be easy to say that, like, oh, school just let out and they're all going away from the building towards the parking lot. But people seem to be going in every which direction, so it's really impossible to tell what's going on.
Yeah.
It looks for all the world like there's a fire drill going on and they're just sort of milling about in this sort of parking lot area. It's
distracting too. It feels like it really detracts. It draws your attention to what's going on behind, as opposed to if everyone's just kind of filing through in one direction.
Yeah,
I think I could ignore it.
And there are also, just like, for as many students as there are walking in various directions, there are also some kids just sort of standing around. So it really makes it hard to place what we're even doing here.
In what else you've covered so far, there's no indication of what time of day this is or when this is in the school day?
No, because the scene prior to this takes place at night. I'm assuming, like, nighttime the day before this.
Sure, yeah.
And the scene immediately after this does not take place in the school. It takes place in the woods that we see them walk into, obviously. Oh, yeah. I'm really glad that as much as I hate to give people scenes where absolutely nothing happens, I like that I am able to give those types of scenes to people who have no idea what's going on, because I do, and I want to know what you think is going on here.
Is this the first time we see Edward?
No.
Because it sure feels like it. This is set up as like a, oh man, who's that guy?
No.
Check out this dude.
No, that happened roughly 30 scenes ago. I think actually scene 7 is when we get introduced to Edward. He's been around for a while.
Okay.
As much as I don't like to play with, I like to try to stick within the context of the scene that we're talking about. I also like having what I feel like an anthropologist contacting an uncontacted tribe for the first time.
Yeah.
Someone who has no knowledge of what just happened or what is about to happen. So I'm going to ask you, what do you think happened in the scene previous? Because clearly they're looking at each other with some pretty serious intent. What do you think just happened?
I almost have qualms with the pretense, with the setup, that question itself. Because I'm not sure they're looking at each other. I mean, that's very obvious at the end of the scene, but it seems like it's the case throughout the entire well, okay, yeah. I think he's looking at her. I'm not sure she's ever looking at him.
They make eye contact, and I was very careful in finding this because there's really nothing else to talk about in this scene. But the way it works is she sees him, he sees her. She walks towards him, they make eye contact, she walks past him into the woods, and he follows behind her, never exchanging a word.
See, okay, so I mean, you sent me the scene ahead of time, and I watched it like 3 or 4 times. I went through it, and I just kept watching her eyes. And I mean, the beginning, they just sort of dart back and forth. They're kind of like looking or searching for something around the area. And then, yes, they sort of settle, and you think it's on him, but her eyes never move. And as she passes him, her eyes are very clearly at his chest level.
Interesting.
And just like keep going by.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't feel like there's eye contact there at all. Which is what led me to the theory, to answer your actual question.
Yeah.
I think she's being hypnotized. I feel like that's a thing, right? Doesn't he have the ability to...
That's interesting.
Isn't that a thing vampires can do? Force you to do stuff?
I mean, yes and no. That is very traditional vampire ability to enthrall someone like that. I don't know that Edward specifically has that. He can read minds, but he can't read Bella's mind, because Bella's fun special power is that vampire powers don't work on her.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
nice.
good for her.
She's just born with that.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a little genetic crossover or something like that in her DNA.
I don't know.
Nice.
It's never explained too deep. That's probably for the best.
1 in 7.8 billion people get it, I guess?
Approximately, yeah. Apparently it's a pretty rare trait. You're just sort of born with it, I guess. It's weird. And it's not like... okay, I'm going to try to not get too into the weeds about this, but it's one of those things that makes no sense to me, because it's like vampires in Twilight gained these weird vampire powers, such as reading minds. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It seems arbitrary. but it seems established that they only gain those after they become vampires. Like, as far as I'm aware, Edward could not read minds before he was a vampire. It makes no sense.
Right.
But apparently Bella has this ability before, because she's not a vampire in this movie. So she was just born with this ability where vampire powers don't work on her. So is it related to vampirism, or is it a genetic thing? Is she a weird mutant? It's unclear.
And this is never explained in the books or anything?
I mean, maybe in some deep book somewhere else. I mean, probably not in like any official books. I'm sure there are fan fiction explanations for it, but this isn't a fan fiction show. I honestly think it's for the best that it's never explained, because, you know, for the Star Wars fans out there, then you don't run into the midichlorian problem.
Yeah, yes.
Where you establish these Star Wars movies where the Force is mysterious and cool, and then you spend a whole movie trying to explain exactly what it is biologically, and it loses some of that cool.
Yeah, and in the meantime, you just dig your hole deeper. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, you're
and
right.
you spend a lot of important movie time explaining boring things that don't matter and just confuse more than anything else. So it's probably the best that the movies never get into exactly why or how this is the case.
Yes.
Good on you for showing some restraint there, Twilight, for knowing that your core audience is not going to care about the specifics of how these powers work. They just have them, and that's fine. We accept that, and we move on.
So are each vampire is only allowed one single vampire power, and his is to read minds? He can't manipulate her or hypnotize her or anything like that?
There are certain base powers that every vampire has, such as moving really fast and being really strong and having unbreakable skin. And then it seems like only certain vampires get extra powers. The other vampires in Edward's little family, some of them do have abilities. Like there is one who can see the future, sort of That's So Raven style. But there are others who don't, which was kind of a surprise to me, actually, because up until when I started this, I actually thought all of them, you get one power when you become a vampire, but apparently that's not the case.
I gotta go to school.
Yeah, it's arbitrary and it's unexplained, and again, probably for the best. It's clear that it was never intended to be thought about as much as this podcast requires us to think about it. And I think that's a sign that maybe this is a flawed concept for a show. But we're in too deep for that to be important now.
Of course.
Bella walks past Edward into the forest, and it's really unclear to me why she decides to go into the forest. I guess to follow up my question of what do you think was happening before, now's a good time to ask, what do you think is going to happen when they go into the woods?
I mean, it's real predatory, that shot and that music and those eyes.
Yeah.
And that gaze and that pompadour he's rocking. And everything about it just feels real predatory and real creepy. I guess that's what they were going for. So that's what I assume is going to happen. He's going to prey on her. Is that a phrase?
Yeah.
Does that work for this
No,
situation?
I think that's very much what the movie is leading you to believe. Not to steal too much from next week's episode, but they're going to have a conversation out in the woods. And the forest behind the school seems like such a bad place to have a talk with someone.
Does she know that she's about to have a conversation? Because again, I don't know if it was the what felt like the lack of eye contact.
Yeah,
but it did not feel like there was any kind of like, hey, let's go over here and talk.
Right.
Let's go this direction.
So much.
It looks like she was seeing a 2-for-1 Arby's deal on a sign and was salivating and was like, I'm going for that.
Right. And so much of this is you have to read deep into the unspoken communication between the two of them. Specifically, you have to know what they normally do in order to understand that they are not acting normally in this scene. Like, Bella is not walking to her truck. She's walking into the forest, something she does not normally do. She does not make eye contact with or talk to Edward. She just ignores him and walks right past. Also something weird that would signal to Edward, like, definitely signal to Edward that something is up, but there's nothing in this scene other than plot convenience that would make me think she's signaling to Edward we need to have a conversation. She's just sort of walking out into the woods, trusting that he will be compelled to follow her.
Oh, okay. See, that's the weird part is that it's like she's compelling him to follow, because it really feels the other way around. She feels it, to your point of like something's up. It almost feels like she's seeing it now. The whatever is up is up right this moment. It's the dawning, the realization is happening to her in this moment. So I don't know what happened in the previous scene, but it seems like everything's going down right now, especially when the music comes in.
You are right in that she recently came to a realization. But the previous 3 or 4 scenes have involved a lot of flashbacks and Google searches that sort of have led up to this, what is about to be a confrontation in the next scene, but we'll get into that later. What do you think?
Is she realizing he's a vampire?
Yeah, that's basically the gist of it. She is put together.
I feel such pride. I feel like
I
want to win an award.
I don't know what award to give you. Here, I'll ring a bell.
Oh, thanks so much.
Good job. You got it right. So knowing all that we know, I still feel like the woods is a weird place to have that conversation.
Yeah. Oh, this is what? This is 2005
2008.
It's supposed to be?
2008 the movie comes out.
Okay. So, but if that's the modern year, the current year
I would assume,
in the setting as well, I guess cell phones are aren't really a thing yet so much.
Yeah.
No, they are. I mean, you could text someone, SMS.
Yeah,
text.
no, there was texting.
I don't know. Just be like, you a vampire, bro?
Right. Or at least I don't know, in a car or something. There's got to be somewhere better than in the woods, especially because my fifth or sixth thought upon viewing this scene several times is they are walking out into the woods in this very clearly weird way. It basically in front of the entire school who's just sort of milling about. At least one person is going to see this, and that's going to be enough to start 1,000 rumors.
How is no one concerned? No one is like, oh, guy and girl going off into the woods. Maybe we should be careful or check on them, or I don't know.
Especially with the added context of Bella's the new girl at a very, very small school.
Yeah.
And Edward is part of this weird group that no one knows is a vampire. They just know they're really weird and keep to themselves. So basically, when the two most interesting people in school walk off into the woods behind the school, I'm assuming after school is over, there are definitely going to be people talking about what are they doing back there. Specifically, they went back there to either do drugs or fuck or both.
Well, and it wasn't together. She's
right.
She's truly it seems meters, many yards in front of Edward. That is suspicious. That's so suspicious. And how does no one of the 50 people we see passing by not notice this?
I'm sure people do. It's the kind of thing that you wouldn't stop them from doing it if you saw this. But the next day at school, you'd be like, guys, you won't believe what I saw yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed that we're robbed of that. I don't think at any point later on in the movie do we get anyone asking hey, what was that about? Or just I want nothing more than Twilight from everyone else's perspective of just some unimportant other high school student who's just watching all of these people just being what are they doing? Who are these people?
They have a board at home with a bunch of thread lining up all the details and clues that they found.
Or just oh my God, everyone here is so weird. I can't wait to get out of here and go to college.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going across the country. Harvard, here I come.
Yeah. Is there a clearing in the forest that she knows about where that she thinks is good to have a conversation?
Yeah.
She's walking out there with such intent.
She immediately knows where she's headed.
Right.
But that's it, right? I mean, okay, I could see the argument that she doesn't want to go to her truck to have this conversation because if she's realizing this, then maybe there's some fear and she doesn't want to be in an enclosed space with him or something.
Oh, sure. Better to be out in the woods.
Yes, far away from the crowd. Yeah, I mean, there was very clearly a huge open grassy knoll that would have still been in eyesight of the students who are walking around. Just right there.
Right.
Perfect spot.
Yeah.
Quick check, buddy. Vampire? Yes? No?
And also, no matter how this conversation ends, you're going to have to walk back to your car, and it's going to take a lot longer than it normally would. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and you might be bleeding.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I guess if you do get eaten by the vampire, then you don't have to worry about walking back to your car. But I assume, I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe have it somewhere, literally anywhere else would be a better place to have this. If I wanted to talk to someone, I would not just walk off into the woods and hope that they follow me.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I'm sorry. I can't get over the thing, what seemed to me like no eye contact or no dialogue or verbal, any kind of body language to say hey, let's go have a chat over here.
Right.
Just none at all. So it's bizarre. It's so bizarre. I'm going to brush right past you.
It is. And, it's one of those things that makes no sense at all in universe, but the realistic, boring answer is that this scene is less than a minute in a 2-hour movie, and it's really not important. All we need to do is establish it's a glorified establishing shot is what it is. We just need to have these two characters walk out into the woods where the next very important scene is going to happen, because if we cut straight from Bella at night in her bedroom to the two of them in a forest during the day, that's going to be sort of a confusing cut. So we just need to have this little connective tissue chunk of movie establishing that they are in this one place and they are moving to another location, and that's really all there is to this scene.
Yeah, which, hey, I mean, I can respect. I think that's a useful tactic to use in a film, and I even get that justification helps me feel a little more affinity for the score too that's playing underneath it, right? Because I get the idea that sometimes you want the tension in the music to not necessarily always be right on the news, but maybe in leading up to the news to help build that suspense a little bit.
Right. This scene exists to establish the location, but also to set a mood. And based on what you've told me, you're sort of, having not seen this movie in a long time, so we can basically call that no context at all. It seems like it was very effective in communicating what needed to be communicated, that the relation, the sort of feelings between these two people and the sense of dread this movie wants you to have. That's another thing I've been sort of curious about, is that like so much of this movie that we've seen so far is trying to establish that feeling that he might eat her, basically.
Yeah.
Is trying to establish that, he's a monster, he's a danger to her. And it's hard for me and a lot of other people who have seen this movie a lot and know where this goes. It's kind of hard to believe that she's in any danger at all. And so I do wonder, for the first time viewer, does it successfully convey some suspense that that she might be in danger here? And I guess it kind of did, according to your reading of it.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, definitely predatory was the vibe I got, creepy for sure. So I think, it sounds like that's what they're going for a little bit. I mean, I don't know if eating was on like the top. It just felt like a sort of modern day, very icky, creepy, kind of man follows woman into woods situation.
And this is her true love.
Yeah, I guess so. You must have a great mind.
I guess it's another
real good sense of humor.
It's a red flag out there, kids. If he follows you into the woods from a distance without saying anything, that's generally not a good sign.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
If she leads you into the woods without saying anything.
That's true. I really have only thought about the red flags in terms of Edward's behavior towards Bella. Really, they could both use some clear communication in this case.
Yeah. Especially given that he can't read her mind.
Right. She needs to say to him, "Hey, can we have a talk?" And I think, it would go a lot smoother for both of them.
Now, does he go to this school? This is a tangential question. Does he go to this school?
Ooh, buddy. Yes, he does.
So she's coming. It feels like she's coming out with everyone else, or everyone's around her. Why is he approaching the school? Did he play hooky that day?
See, that leads into my question that we talked about at the top of the episode of, is this the start of the school day? Is this just lunch? Why is everyone walking in different directions?
So confusing. And I every time, so after the first time, I caught a glimpse of someone who walks behind Edward, and I couldn't stop looking at him because he looks like he's like 35. He's very clearly in the wrong place.
Or a teacher.
Maybe. He's with another student.
Yeah. If it's the guy...
But then, if
it's the guy I think you're talking about, I think he's definitely a teacher, because he is, dressed differently from everyone else, but also, clearly much older. And there's like at least one other adult that walks through the background of the scenes. And, it's a school. It makes sense that there would be a teacher or two there afterwards, I guess.
I guess this is afterwards, yeah. I wish I was adept at being like, well, the sun was... right above the horizon, so very clearly.
Well, that's the thing about Forks, is that it's cloudy all the time, so vampires can live there because there's less direct sunlight.
They should move to London. Come here. We get almost no sunlight.
There could be vampires there.
With the exception of today. It was beautiful today.
Oh, must be nice.
No, I mean, I think if there are vampires, they're all Edwardian. This feels just like in a very Edwardian Victoria, like Jekyll and Hyde style.
Well, of course this is an Edwardian vampire. His name is Edward.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a good joke.
This is the original Edwardian.
Let's start to wrap this up. If you had to give this scene a name, what would it be? And this is also going to be the name of the episode, so make it good.
I'ma get you.
I'ma getcha. Can you spell that for me?
I think I-M-M-A, I apostrophe M-M-A.
That's what I had. It's getcha that I'm sort of getting caught up on.
I mean, I think it's dealer's choice on if you want the Y or not. I'm gonna Getcha,
okay,
or Ya.
That's what I put
I'ma
down.
Getcha.
I'ma getcha. Great. That's as good a title as any for this nothing of a scene.
Yeah, and it, again, feels like it's both ways. I feel like it's what she's saying to him and what he's saying to her.
That is true. They're going to get each other in the end. David Martinez, if people want to learn more about you or maybe a podcast you host or the things you do there in London, where could they maybe follow you on social media or something like that?
They can check me out at dmartinezkc. That's where I am on Instagram. Mm-hmm. You can also check out the podcast that I co-host with Michael Foster, my other host, and that is called Audio Obscura. We are at Audio Obscura Pod on Instagram or audioobscurapod.com as well.
There you go. If you want to follow this show on social media, you can do so at bitesizedpod_ on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. You can also send an email to the show to myfavoritetwilightpodcast@gmail.com. If you had a good time, please give this show a share, a review, a like, a subscribe. Stuff like that really does go a long way in helping get this podcast to new ears. We've had a big influx of new listeners recently, and I want to keep that going. All that information and more available at twilightpodcast.com, a real generic URL that I own and actually exists. Thank you so much to my editor, Ben Oxher, for putting this episode together. Thank you to the band Swimwear Department for letting me use their song Mauled to Death as our theme. Kellen Lutz, if you're out there, if you're listening, please get in contact so you can come on the show. That is it. That is all we have for this episode. We'll see you next time. As we always say at the end of every episode,
go get bit.
Go get bit. See you next time.
We have very similar eyebrows.
Rob, we had to pluck the heck out of your eyebrows.
Well,
okay.
That is different.
I've never heard someone be so flirty about somebody. She's like, Rob, your eyebrows.